You say nothing and people still react to you. Conversations slow down around you, responses become more measured, and without raising your voice or changing your tone, something in the room shifts. So the question becomes simple. Why does becoming calm make people uncomfortable? And what is it about that calm that begins to disturb them? Most people believe calmness makes you easier to be around. They assume that being relaxed, composed, and unreactive lowers tension and keeps interactions smooth. But in practice, something else happens. When you remove visible emotion from your behavior, you don't become easier to understand. You become harder to read. And that is where the shift begins. Calm doesn't remove tension. It relocates it. What people respond to is not just what you say, but how predictable you are while saying it. Most interactions run on subtle patterns, a reaction followed by another reaction, a rhythm that allows others to anticipate what comes next. When you interrupt that rhythm by remaining calm where a reaction is expected, you don't just change your behavior, you disrupt their ability to predict you. And unpredictability is rarely experienced as comfort. And that disruption is not something people immediately understand. They feel it before they can explain it. A pause that lasts slightly longer than expected. A response that carries no emotional signal. A moment where they wait for a reaction that never comes. It creates a kind of uncertainty that doesn't exist when everything follows a familiar pattern. And uncertainty, even in small amounts, is enough to make people uneasy, because what they feel doesn't match what they can explain. That unease doesn't come from anything you did wrong. It comes from the absence of what they expected you to do. People rely on emotional cues to navigate interactions, to know when to push, when to pull back, when they have influence, and when they don't. When those cues disappear, the interaction loses its structure, and when structure disappears, control becomes uncertain. At that point, something subtle begins to happen beneath the surface. People start adjusting to you, not consciously, but instinctively. They test small things, slight changes in tone, small provocations, attempts to see where your limits are. They are not always aware of it, but they are trying to restore the pattern, trying to find a way to read you again. And when those attempts fail, the discomfort deepens. They're not reacting to you. They're reacting to the loss of something they relied on. What unsettles them is not resistance, but absence. You are not pushing back, not reacting, not giving them anything to measure. And without that feedback, their usual way of understanding you stops working. There is nothing to interpret, nothing to respond to in the way they are used to. And in that silence, they are left with only their own assumptions, which begin to fill the space you no longer occupy. And assumptions tend to move in one direction. Those assumptions rarely stay neutral. In the absence of clear signals, the mind tends to lean toward caution, and caution often turns into suspicion. You begin to be seen as distant, controlled, or even calculated, not because you are projecting those traits directly, but because your calm removes the familiar cues that would normally soften your presence. And without those cues, people begin to assign their own meaning to what they cannot read, which means you're no longer being seen directly. And once that meaning begins to take hold, it does not remain confined to a single moment or interaction. It gradually expands and starts to shape the way every future interaction is interpreted, often without anyone realizing that a shift has already taken place. Your calm is no longer experienced as simple composure or control. It is reframed as distance, as if you are deliberately placing space between yourself and others. Your silence, which may have been neutral or even thoughtful, is no longer perceived that way. It begins to carry weight, to feel intentional, as though you are choosing not to engage rather than simply not reacting. And even when you are doing nothing beyond observing, maintaining a steady presence without interruption, it can feel to others as if you are withholding something, as if there is a layer beneath your behavior they cannot access. That subtle feeling, even when it is not grounded in anything concrete, starts to influence how they respond to you, and over time it becomes the default way they interpret your presence. And as that interpretation becomes more consistent, people begin to respond to you through it, rather than to you directly. Their tone adjusts, their timing changes, and their behavior becomes slightly more guarded without them consciously deciding to act that way. They may speak more carefully, reveal less, or watch you more closely, trying to understand something that no longer presents itself clearly. What makes this difficult to notice at first is that nothing appears openly different. The interaction continues, the conversation moves forward, but the underlying dynamic has shifted. And because that shift is subtle, it often goes unaddressed, even though it continues to shape every exchange that follows. Once perception settles, behavior stops mattering as much. At a deeper level, what they are responding to is not your calm itself, but what your calm removes from the interaction. It removes the immediate feedback they are used to relying on. It removes the emotional signals that help them measure their influence, their position, and their impact on you. Without those signals, they lose a certain kind of access, not to your words, but to your reactions. And that loss is not always recognized consciously. It is felt as a change in the dynamic, a shift that is difficult to define but impossible to ignore. And when that access is no longer available, people begin to experience a subtle loss of control that they cannot easily explain. It is not control in an obvious sense, but the small unconscious influence they once had over how you responded, how quickly you reacted, and how much of yourself you revealed in the moment. When that influence disappears, even slightly, it creates a quiet imbalance. They may not recognize it directly, but they feel the difference between interacting with someone predictable and someone who no longer follows the same patterns. And that difference, even when it is subtle, is enough to make them uneasy, because control was never as visible as it felt. And because that unease has no clear source, it often gets redirected into a judgment about you. People rarely pause to examine why your presence feels different. Instead, they simplify it. They begin to see you as cold, distant, or difficult, not because those labels are accurate, but because they provide an explanation that resolves the discomfort. It is easier to define you than to question what has changed in the dynamic itself. And once that definition is formed, it becomes the lens through which they continue to interpret you. And once that lens is in place, it does not require much to sustain itself. Small moments are enough to reinforce it. A pause before you respond, a lack of visible reaction, a controlled tone that does not rise or fall with the situation. Each of these becomes confirmation of what they have already decided, Over time, they stop looking for new information and begin filtering everything through that existing perception. And when perception becomes fixed in that way, your actual behavior matters less than the meaning they have already attached to it. This is where calmness begins to take on a different kind of power, not because it changes how you feel internally, but because of how it alters the space around you. You're no longer participating in the same emotional exchanges that keep interactions predictable and easy to navigate. You are not reinforcing the same patterns, not reacting in ways that allow others to quickly understand where they stand with you. And when that familiar structure is removed, people are forced to operate without the usual reference points they rely on. That absence creates distance not through action, but through the lack of it. And in that distance, something else becomes more visible. Without the constant exchange of reactions, people are left more exposed to themselves. They become more aware of how much they rely on others to reflect back certainty, approval, or emotional direction. When that reflection is no longer provided, even in subtle ways, it creates a kind of internal pressure. They are no longer responding only to you. They are also confronting the absence of something they expected to receive, and that experience is not always comfortable. And when that discomfort lingers without a clear explanation, it begins to shape how they interpret your presence in a more stable way. You are no longer just someone who is calm. You become the source of a feeling they cannot easily resolve. Over time, that feeling attaches itself to you, even though it originates within them. And because it is easier to distance themselves from the source than to examine the feeling itself, the response becomes more consistent. They withdraw slightly, they become more cautious, or they simply keep a subtle distance without fully understanding why. At this point, most people start adjusting themselves without realizing it, trying to remove the tension instead of understanding it. If you've ever felt like people shift around you the moment you stop reacting the same way, this is where things become unclear. The art of strategic indifference breaks down how to stay composed, protect your mental space, and move without giving others something to use against you. If you want to understand that properly, the link is in the description. This is the point where most people misunderstand what is happening and try to correct it in the wrong direction. They assume the distance is something they need to fix, so they begin to adjust themselves, adding more expression, more reaction, more reassurance, trying to restore the balance that once made interactions feel normal. But this effort often creates the opposite effect, because what caused the shift was not a lack of engagement. It was the removal of something deeper that cannot be recreated through surface behavior. Because what changed was not visible, but structural. What was removed was not communication, but emotional accessibility in its most predictable form. You are still present, still engaged, still aware, but you are no longer offering the immediate reactions that allow others to measure and influence you in real time. That difference is subtle, but it changes the structure of the interaction itself. It limits how easily others can guide the exchange, how quickly they can read your position, and how much control they have over the direction of the moment. And that limitation is felt even when it is not consciously understood. And when that limitation becomes consistent, it begins to redefine your position within any social environment you move through. You are no longer treated in the same way as someone who reacts openly or predictably. There is more hesitation around you, more careful observation, and a subtle shift in how people approach interaction with you. They begin to measure their words more precisely, to hold back slightly, to wait for signals that no longer arrive in the way they expect. And that change, while quiet, is enough to alter the entire dynamic without a single direct confrontation. And that's when your presence starts to carry weight on its own. This is where the effect becomes more visible, even if it is never openly acknowledged. You begin to notice that people are slightly more cautious in what they say, slightly more reserved in how they engage, and sometimes even slightly distant without any clear reason. The interactions continue, but they no longer carry the same ease or familiarity as before. And what makes this difficult to interpret is that nothing has been said, nothing has been done in an obvious way, yet the shift is present and consistent. If you're starting to notice these patterns, you already see more than most people do. The advantage, once you begin to understand this clearly, is not in trying to correct how others respond to you, or in attempting to restore the comfort that once existed. It lies in recognizing that the discomfort they feel is not something you need to resolve. It is a byproduct of the space your calm creates, a space where others can no longer rely on the usual patterns to navigate you. And when you stop treating that discomfort as a problem to fix, you begin to move differently within it. From that point, your behavior becomes more deliberate, not because you are trying to control others, but because you are no longer reacting in ways that give away your position without intention. You choose when to respond, how much to reveal, and what to leave unexpressed, without feeling the need to fill every silence or resolve every tension. And that restraint does not create weakness. It creates clarity, both for you and for the dynamic itself, even if others are still trying to adjust to it. Over time, this begins to change the way you experience interactions at a deeper level, not just in how you respond, but in how you perceive what is happening beneath the surface. You are no longer moving through conversations with the need to be understood immediately or to maintain a certain level of comfort for others just to keep things smooth. That pressure starts to fall away. You begin to notice how much of social behavior is built on reaction, on the constant exchange of signals, expressions, and emotional cues that keep everything predictable and easy to navigate. And when you step outside of that exchange, even in small, almost unnoticeable ways, the entire structure becomes more visible. You start to see how people rely on those patterns, how they expect them, and how much of the interaction depends on them continuing. And that awareness doesn't just apply to others. It reflects back on you as well, showing you how you once participated in the same patterns without questioning them. And once you see it clearly, without distortion, you can't move the same way again because you understand what is actually happening in real time. And once you begin to see that structure with real clarity, it becomes increasingly difficult to return to reacting the way you once did, even if you tried. Not because you are consciously attempting to maintain a certain position or image, but because you now understand what those reactions actually reveal and how easily they can be used to shape the direction of an interaction without you realizing it. What once felt natural begins to feel exposed. The calm you maintain is no longer just a passive state or a personality trait. It becomes something more deliberate, a form of control over what you choose to reveal, how much you reveal, and when you allow it to surface. And that level of control is what makes it unsettling to others, because it is not easily accessible, not easily read, and not something that can be influenced from the outside in the way they are used to. If this made something clearer for you, then you've probably already started to see how differently people respond the moment you stop reacting in predictable ways. Let me know in the comments if you've ever noticed this shift yourself, where people become more distant, more cautious, or slightly uncomfortable without saying anything directly. If you want to go deeper into how to hold that position without losing control of it, The Art of Strategic Indifference breaks it down in detail, and the link is in the description. And if this way of understanding people and social dynamics resonates with you, stay with it, because this is only one layer of how these patterns actually work.